One of the things that we really coach our clients on is that they're not coming to us to buy property. They're actually coming to us to do something much more important than that. You don't buy property just to tell your mates in 10 years, I own investment property. You're doing it so that you can achieve a goal that is really important to your life. So the first thing we need to consider is what exactly are you trying to achieve and what is the best way of getting there? So what are the common goals that we see? Funding your children is a very common one. Holidaying is a very common one. But many people have a very simple aspiration, and that is that they want to work for love, not because they have to. And how powerful would that be? Once we understand the aspirations of our clients, the next really important question is, why property? And I get some very interesting responses. I get, because it always goes up, which is not true, because it performs better than anything else, which is not necessarily true, and because there's less risk with property, which again is not necessarily true. What I'm going to show you now is why property is perceived to be a very good way to accelerate your wealth, and it's not necessarily what you think. Consider this. There are many different asset classes and things that you can invest in. And if a client says to me, well, my aspiration is to have $3 million worth of assets in the bank in 10 years, the important thing for me is to find the best way to get there, and you don't have to invest in property. What could you invest in? So a very average investment that we get from clients is about $50,000. So let's use $50,000 in this example. Now remember, I'm trying to achieve $3 million in the future. And I've got three asset classes that I can choose from. I can go into cash, I can go into shares, or I can go into direct residential property. I've got 10 years to try and get my clients $50,000 to turn into $3 million. Let's assume that I take that $50,000 and I invest it in cash. Now cash has averaged about 4.5% for the last 10 years. Assume it does 4.5%, and that's exactly the return that you get for the next 10. 4.5% for the next 10 years on your $50,000, you would end up with an amount of about $75,000 at the end of the 10 years. Okay, so we're nowhere near the 3 million, okay? So let's cross that off and let's invest in the share market. Australian shares have performed at about 9.5% for the last 20 years. This is Australian share market. Let's assume that we put your $50,000 into shares and I achieve a return of 9% a year for the next 10 years. You would end up with about $160,000 at the end of that period, okay? So $160,000 is a lot better than your 75, but you're still definitely nowhere near your 3 million, okay? So let's cross that off. Let's invest in direct residential property instead. Now you know that $50,000 isn't even going to buy you a car park in Melbourne these days, so we're going to need to borrow some money from the bank. So we're going to take that $50,000 and use it as a deposit on a property and borrow $450,000 from the bank. So our total investable amount is $500,000. The Australian residential property market has also averaged 9% for the last 20 years in Australia. But let's assume you don't take advice and you don't get anywhere near that and you get 4.5%. If I invest your $500,000 into a property that achieves 4.5% every year for the next 10 years, you would have $750,000 at the end of the 10 years. Okay, so we're still not at the 3 million, but geez, we're getting a lot closer. The reason I'm giving you this 4.5% example is because many people have the wrong idea that property is performing better than other asset classes, but in fact, it's the fact that you can turn this 50 into $500,000. So you've got a larger pool of money working for you. It's called leverage, and leverage is really effective at helping you accelerate your wealth, as long as you don't take too much risk and you're leveraging the right amount for your circumstances. So let's go back to that example. I've got $500,000 that I can invest, and you do listen to really good advice, and instead of getting 4.5% per annum, you get 9% per annum. At the end of the 10 years, if I can get you 9% per annum on that $500,000 investment, you would have about $1.6 million. So you can see that you're getting very close to achieving that $3 million portfolio. So what is important is taking that $50,000 and being able to leverage it. Most Australians cannot save enough to just invest their cash. We need leverage to accelerate our wealth and achieve the dreams and the aspirations that we have in the future. But what is also important is the leverage and the capital growth, is getting those two together.